Right now, you're more likely to get struck by lightning than prosecuted for owning a slave. And so traffickers operate with an insane amount of impunity. They can get away with this. It's a high reward, low risk crime. And we've got to invert that. We've got to make this a high risk, low reward crime if we're going to make a difference.
Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we welcome John Richmond, Chief Impact Officer at Atlas Free. John formerly served as the highest-ranking role in the U.S. government dedicated to fighting human trafficking as the U.S. Ambassador to combat trafficking. Before being appointed as an ambassador, John helped found the Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit at the Department of Justice, served as a federal prosecutor, and worked internationally with organizations like International Justice Mission. Join us and learn from the family principles that he and his wife developed that will help you become a better servant leader.
John, thank you for joining us on the Servant Leadership Podcast.
It's great to be with you.
This is so fun. You ended up in the highest ranking position in the U.S. government to combat human trafficking. That is a crazy position. How does somebody even end up there? What was the career trajectory to get there?
You know, it's interesting. I was recently talking to some law students. They were asking me, like, how did your career progress? And did you always want to do these jobs? And I reminded them that when I graduated from law school, it was before Congress passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It was before the Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit was formed at the Department of Justice. It was long before there was ever an ambassador at large for monitoring and combating human trafficking. So I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I wanted to be involved in things that mattered. And I wanted to be involved in things that were kind of leaning into how we improve systems and how we improve the delivery system of justice and services to people who need them most. And so I was practiced law for about 4 years at a firm, and then had the opportunity to go with an NGO called International Justice Mission. Just as it was starting up, they were kind enough to let my wife and our little daughter at the time move to India, where I lived for a little over 3 years and really learned for the first time what human trafficking looks like and how traffickers think and what survivors really need. We built that office and built some sustainable leadership, and I handed that off to some great friends who continued to grow it, and came back to the United States and was a federal prosecutor at the Department of Justice, helped found the Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit at Justice, and then got to try cases all over the United States, sex trafficking and labor trafficking cases that were just an incredible opportunity to really understand how this works and how our criminal justice system and our social service systems respond. And while I was at Justice, I got the international portfolio. So I spent a lot of time at the United Nations, in the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, thinking about policy issues, which ultimately I think led to a chance to serve as the U.S. Ambassador on Trafficking in Persons, thinking about it from a foreign policy lens and thinking about how do we get countries around the world to do better on this? How do we advance American values around human dignity on the foreign policy landscape with all the other geopolitical interests that are happening? So it's been a meaningful career, but definitely not one that I plotted out or planned from the beginning. I think it was just a series of opportunities to take some risks, to make some left turns, to leave great jobs in the hope that we could do something even more significant on the other side.
Wow. Did you know the ambassador appointment was coming when it came, or was it a surprise to you?
I knew it was in the works, and I had known the prior ambassadors. We're kind of all friends. The anti-trafficking world is pretty small, and it's a apolitical space. That is, there are champions on trafficking on both sides of the political aisle. And so the prior ambassadors were kind and gracious to me and encouraging. But as it came, I wasn't a typical appointee in the sense that I never made a political donation in my life to any candidate. And so I had very little to fill out on those forms about what you're doing. And so it was pretty clear. The one thing is true is I didn't buy my appointment. That is for certain. But my mom is really proud to say that the Senate unanimously confirmed me. She likes to say that the Senate can't agree on much except her little boy.
Mm,
And I think that's a mom's prerogative to make that case. But we were glad to have consensus and be able to lead through that.
I love that. When we talk about trafficking, that might be a new term to some people. What all does human trafficking entail, especially as you've been in this industry for so long?
That's a fair question because I think there's a lot of confusion about what trafficking is. And partly because we have these really complicated domestic and international definitions, but then also we see different media representations. And so we might see a TV show or a 30-minute news magazine or hear a story, and we think that's what trafficking is. The reality is, trafficking is just compelling someone to work or compelling them to engage in a commercial sex act, and all the emphasis is on compelling. That is, the real question is, are you free to quit your job and go work elsewhere if you want to? And if someone's keeping you from competing in the marketplace for a different job, they're taking away your liberty. So if you work at Burger King and you get tired of your manager and you want to go do French fries at McDonald's, you ought to be free to compete for the next job at McDonald's. If the
Mm.
Burger King guy is preventing you from moving on, that's wrong. And that's what happens, honestly, to a lot of people around the world, is they get trapped by nefarious employment schemes that say they don't get to quit and go work elsewhere if they want to, or they don't get to make the most basic decisions, like when they wake up, where they work, and who touches their bodies. And if someone else is profiting from the commercial exploitation of someone's sexuality or the exploitation of their labor, and they can't alienate their labor in free markets, then we really run afoul of the principles that prevent us from slavery.
Hmm. How big is the issue, both in the US and internationally? Because when I walk around just living in the suburbs of Chicago, I would think that human trafficking doesn't exist.
Mhm. Our best global prevalence estimate came out in 2022 from the International Labor Organization, and that estimated that at any given moment in time, there are 27.6 million victims of sex trafficking and forced labor. And just to put that into some level of relevance and reference, um, there were about 12 million people exploited during all 400 years of the transatlantic slave trade. And so there are twice as many people now actually being exploited in human trafficking than the entire transatlantic slave trade. More people than ever before in human history. The global estimate's up 10% from the prior estimate. So it feels like we're going in the wrong direction in terms of the number of people. So it's a big issue. It's found everywhere in the world. I did a case years ago in the suburbs of Chicago, a big forced labor and sex trafficking case. It happens all over. It's just where we look for it, and it's something that's been happening throughout all of human history. And so it's something we really have to fight against.
Well, I mean, I know you and many others are fighting against it, but you're talking about it growing. Is this something that can be solved? Is it something that is you're just trying to lessen it? Or are you just trying to stop it from going as fast as it is, but knowing it will always grow?
I think there are two different ways to look at that. I think we're never going to just like change human nature. There's always going to be scoundrels out there who want to exploit other people and cheat other people. We have to be vigilant against that. But what we can end is human trafficking that's institutionally protected, that's democratically approved, that's religiously condoned. We can end the systems of slavery that operate, and we've done that in the United States. The United States once had wide open slavery. It was government approved and sanctioned. It's in our Constitution in three places, and we moved away from that. Now we still have some human trafficking, but on a much smaller degree. It has to be hidden by traffickers. They can't be open and notorious like they once were. But there are many places around the world today where trafficking is wide open, where it is culturally protected and institutionally protected. And we can end that and move ourselves to a place of vigilance where we just have to be vigilant against the individual bad actors that are out there.
Mm. We talk a ton on this podcast about servant leadership. How do you see servant leadership show up in such a dark space like human trafficking?
Well, I think in a couple ways. One is that servant leadership, for the whole idea is that the leader is actually putting someone else's interests above their own in order to pursue a greater good. I think the tipping point for really combating trafficking is that when people who when people decide that they're going to care more about individuals they do not know and who cannot benefit them than traffickers care about their own illicit profits.
Mm.
That's the tipping point. Like, we have to actually care about people on the other side of the world or the other county who are struggling, people who are on the margins, people who maybe have been discarded by society or deemed spoiled, and say they matter. They actually have inherent value, and treat them as if they really are our brother or sister or daughter or son, and go after and try to help them become safe so that they can flourish, so that they can have a shot at prosperity.
Mm.
Right now, I think traffickers rely on the idea that most people don't care enough. We're busy. We've got agendas and lives and Netflix series to watch. We've got kids' sports games to go to. There's a lot competing for our time. And so, how do we think about these big global issues in the midst of our busy days? And I think there are ways. There are ways to accelerate this work for people who are full time. There are ways to support them and encourage them. And there are ways to get involved in our local communities. But I think the real tipping point is going to come when we decide that we care more about people we don't know than traffickers care about themselves.
Wow. As you were in government at in such a prominent role, what did you learn that was different during your time there than when you went in thinking this is what we'll be able to do?
Oh my goodness. Government moves slowly. Um, Government is a lagging indicator. If you think about it in economic terms, rarely do great innovations come from government. Government solidifies progress and helps us not sort of backslide, but it rarely is on the cutting edge. And I think one of the things that frustrates a lot of folks that go into government is they come in with big ideas. They want to change things. They want to move quickly. Government's not made to move quickly. Our founding fathers made government, bicameral legislature, checks and balances. It's all intended to go slow.
Mm.
And that can be frustrating. People can chafe against that. But it's probably a good hedge around changes. I think what's inspiring, though, is that the real innovation and change comes from outside government, and then government can capture that and solidify it. So here's an example. There was never regular order, what they call in Washington, like bills going through committee for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It wasn't as if a bunch of senators were arguing with each other for years and years about whether we should have a Civil Rights Act, whether should we end Jim Crow, do we need white and colored water fountains? Is this who we want to be? Never happened. What it was really ambitious leaders like Dr. King and James Farmer and others who said, we're going to push, we're going to innovate, we're going to do lunch counters in Greensboro and freedom rides and boycotts, and we're going to challenge an evil system that is hurting people. And they created a movement. It was actually a fairly small group of people that actually moved the whole culture to the point where Congress relented and passed the Civil Rights Act. In a sense, they grabbed hold of the momentum of the movement and they solidified it in law so that it couldn't backslide. And I think that's what we want to do, is we want to see regular people, moms, dads, teachers, coaches, firemen, like say, this is what we want our culture and society to be, and to press forward, and then look to government to pass a law that sort of solidifies the progress that's been made. But rarely does innovation and progress originate in Congress.
So sitting here listening to all the people listening, what do you recommend people even do? Like, what is that step? Because people hear it and they're like, oh, that sounds wrong, but I wouldn't even know what to do as a next step.
I think there are a couple things that people could do. First is be open to learning a little bit more. So whatever you know about trafficking, there's probably some nuance. There's probably a couple different turns of that screw that need to be explored, where it's not just what you saw in one movie. It's not just what you heard in one article, and become a little more educated about what's happening. The other thing you can do is learn about the signs of trafficking in your own community, where we worry that individuals that are cleaning rooms in hotels or in washing dishes in restaurants might be forced to work. Deeply worried about kids moving through the foster care system being targeted by traffickers at the age of 12 and 13 after they've been through 10 homes and being placed out on the street or put up on an internet website and sold for sex. People without family relationships that might protect them, or even worse, family relationships that are actually the relationships that are exploiting them, where home is not safe. We want to be aware of these signs and signals in our communities because the demand to purchase commercial sex remains incredibly high. The number of people who want to sell sex remains incredibly low. And so traffickers are compelling women, primarily women, to engage in this behavior that they really don't want to. And so we need to know that that's happening in every city in America. And how do we be aware of those signs? And then once we're aware, how do we engage? Every community has an elected district attorney. Folks can meet with them, have a conversation. What are you doing on trafficking? How do you approach the people purchasing sex as well as those who are forced to sell it? How do we make sure we're not prosecuting victims of trafficking for the unlawful acts their traffickers compel them to engage in? Right now, you're more likely to get arrested as a trafficking victim than you are as a trafficker all around the world, including in the U.S. And so we want our law enforcement to be trained. And so get to know the police, get to know the detectives, have some meetings, find out what their needs are. Like, do they have a task force? Do they have an agent who's focused on this? Do they have an officer in charge on this issue? How can we support them in our community? Bring a flat of donuts or whatever and sit down and just have a conversation with what is possible. What do they need? How can we support them? What are they seeing? And then there are probably some nonprofits in your community that are working on these issues. I'm a big fan of supporting things that are local, that you can see and touch. And so maybe you decide you want to encourage them or support them. But there are also international groups that are working, policy groups. I'm fortunate enough to get to work with an organization that has a network of anti-trafficking groups, over 150 of them all over the world. And they resource and support that group. It's called Atlas Free. And I'm really grateful for the work that they do. But there are other policy-based organizations that are looking for better laws, international organizations that are focused globally. So whatever your interest is, if you've got an interest in a particular country, you could probably learn a great deal about what trafficking looks like there. And it's a great way to animate and discuss with our kids what's going on in the world. If we start, like, if your student has a project on the Congo, what a great opportunity to talk about cobalt mining in the DRC and what it's like for little kids there who are forced to work in cobalt extraction. And like, how could we pray for them? How could we protect them? How could we support groups that are working there? And all of a sudden it becomes less about memorizing that the capital is Kinshasa and more about, like, how are the kids in Kinshasa doing? And I think that changes the way we learn because it becomes a story and not just a fact.
Wow. That's so good. I didn't even realize that there are organizations all around the country and around the world trying to combat this. How are they, or how are you measuring success? Like, is this working? Especially with it slowly growing.
Yeah, honestly, this is an incredible question because we're seeing profits from trafficking are skyrocketing. We're seeing higher numbers of victimization of individuals, so the global estimate's increasing. And we're seeing a decreasing rate of convictions for trafficking around the world. And so the numbers feel like they're going in the wrong direction. And so I think it's worth asking, what do we need to do? And I think what we have to look to is, where have we seen success? And we've seen success where we have had focus. Everybody knows that if you've got 8 projects, 70% completed, you've accomplished nothing in a sense. Like, you put a lot of work in, but you haven't got anything across the finish line. And when that happens, we all feel a little anxious. And the key is to slow down, pick one of them and finish it. And then pick the next one and then finish it. Our challenge sometimes is that we're focused on too many things all at once. And we got to get focused. If we want to make a dent in trafficking, if we really want to address this, we've got to make it a priority. And we've got to resource and fund and staff these organizations and agencies around the world to actually take this fight to traffickers. Right now, you're more likely to get struck by lightning than prosecuted for owning a slave. And so traffickers operate with an insane amount of impunity. They can get away with this. It's a high reward, low risk crime. And we've got to invert that. We've got to make this a high risk, low reward crime if we're going to make a difference. And I think we can do that, but we have to use the tried and true, tested methods of fighting crime that we've done in the past, which is creating specialized units, like focusing in agents and officers on this task, where the way they get promoted, the next patch on the uniform, is to actually do one of these cases.
Mm.
We need fast track courts. We need people who understand trauma. We need to train our law enforcement and our first responders in why people don't tell the truth the first time they meet authorities. I think it's really hard for people to understand that if you're a victim of trafficking, you're probably not going to tell the authorities the truth about what's happened to you when you first meet them.
Mm.
You don't trust them. The traffickers probably told you to lie. You're worried you're going to get in trouble for the things that you've done. Let me say it this way. Years ago, my daughter's bike got stolen in our neighborhood. And man, she was upset. We called the little town police. An officer came by. He was so gracious. And he listened to her explain every detail about her bike. The tassels, the bell, the basket, the purple sparkles, the whole thing. And she told them all. And she wanted whoever stole her bike to be found, and she wanted her bike back. And there was no worry from my little girl that if her friends found out her bike was stolen, that they wouldn't want to be her friend anymore. There was no worry that if her parents, if we found out that her bike got stolen, that we would disown her or that we wouldn't want to be her parents or she wouldn't be welcomed in our family. There was no worry that she would be condemned by her faith for having her bike stolen. But there are a lot of sex trafficking victims that very much worry that if people found out that they were a sex trafficking victim, their friends wouldn't want to spend time with them anymore. Their families would kick them out or disown them, and their faith would condemn them forever. And so there's a lot of reason that people might be hesitant to tell the truth if they've experienced some sort of trauma, particularly sexually based trauma. And we need to give space and room for that as we train law enforcement, as we train first responders, as we train NGOs and churches and synagogues and temples. Like, they need to know that people who've experienced abuse are hesitant to tell the truth until they feel safe. We've got to help stabilize them and help them feel safe so that we can then get to the truth so that we can ultimately stop the abuser.
This makes me wonder. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's not like an immediate, I am not being trafficked and now I am being trafficked. There's some process where somebody goes through to become trafficked. I don't think people desire that off the bat, and they might not realize they're in it until it's too late. What's a common scenario you see where it happens and somebody doesn't even know it's happening until it's too late, where then they end up in that situation?
One common scenario on the forced labor side is people respond to a recruitment ad for a job in the Gulf or a job in this other country. And once they get there, the terms of the job are not what they say they're going to be, and their passports are taken, and their freedom of movement is limited, and they're forced to do something else, or they're not paid for what they do. And they get trapped. They're far away from home. They don't have means to get back. They lack resources. And so, like, fraudulent recruitment schemes are a really common way that good people get tricked. But there's also, in the sex trafficking context, there are numerous ways that people get trapped. But I can tell you that I was speaking with one trafficker about how he recruited people, who he targeted. And he was explaining to me that everybody has a dream. He said, I just sell people their dream. So if I meet a young girl and she's from a bad family, a dysfunctional family, a broken family, and her dream is to just have a family, I become a father figure. I sell her that we're a family. We're the family you never had. We're going to love you no matter what, in a way that you never got from your original family of origin. If they want a boyfriend, he became Romeo. He became the romantic lead. If they wanted to be in music videos, be a dancer in music videos, he became a producer. Whatever it is that they wanted. If they wanted fame, he became an agent. They wanted money, he became a funder for their like a VC funder for their work. It was all a lie. It's all a trick. He would just figure out, what do they care most about? What do they want? Then I sell them on what they dream about. I sell them their dream, and then I trap them. This is what scoundrels are doing. They are laying in wait with wicked schemes to oppress the poor.
Mm.
And I think we've got to be cognizant of that in one, just teaching people that, like, some things are just too good to be true. But also, you're not going to change. Someone is not going to come along and improve your life and change your life. Like, the ladder towards self-improvement, the ladder towards flourishing and prosperity is going to be one that every one of us climb, and we don't get to skip a rung. It's going to be slow and gradual until it's all at once at the end. And like, there is no elevator to the top of this mountain. It's a mountain we all have to walk up. And
Mm.
I think we can help people be resilient so that they're less likely to fall prey to the schemes of traffickers.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was interesting, I don't know how many months ago, but a few months ago, I was in Seattle, and that's where we met, and I got to hear you
Yeah.
talk about trafficking. One of the things, that conversation turned in a great direction. It was like a great talk, and then it became an even better talk, because then you started talking about stuff that you do with your family. You have these 10 principles. And as you're talking about, like, how do you prep people? How do you prep your family? Can you get into how you even came up with your family principles? And I don't know if you're willing to share those or not on here, but they
Yeah.
were super impactful for me and Jen.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that they've been impactful for us as well. I mean, one of the things that we really believe is that is the power of with. This incredible preposition, this word with, it connects us to other people. And we really believe that our family, we are meant to be with each other. We're to be with each other in our messes and our successes. I'm to be with my kids on the things that they are passionate about. They're to be with us in our work and in our passions as well. And this is what caused me to go to way too many competitive cheerleading competitions and sit on the floor of gyms for years when my daughter was competing. I had no interest in this topic at all, but I cared about her, right? And if she's passionate about it, I'm going to get passionate about it. We're going to be with her in it.
Mm.
And so we've wanted our kids to be with us in this work, obviously in an age appropriate way over the years, and think about like right and wrong. Think about how do we pursue justice for people. Um, and so we developed when we first started thinking about being a parent. I was a little overwhelmed, probably like most to soon to be dads. I was thinking, I've got a plan for almost everything in my life. We've got contingency plans and operational plans. I've got no clue how to be a dad. I've never done it before. I feel inexperienced and unprepared for this. Back then, like, the only book around was like What to Expect When You're Expecting, and it offered me very little practical advice beyond how to change a diaper. Like, how do you raise a kid? And I think what we learned really quickly was the main goal of parenting. And this is the thing we have to figure out. What's the main thing for your company? What's the main thing for your brand? What's the main thing for your organization? And we realized the main thing was not to have well-behaved children. The main thing was to launch successful adults. Like, that's what we want to do. And so parenting is a lot more about molding character than managing situations. And of course, we have to manage the situations, but the main thing is helping grow these young people into the adults that they're gonna become. And so to do that, we came up with a couple principles that would guide us. And we wanted some principles that would apply when you're 4, when you're 14, when you're 44, and when you're 84, like, to be lifelong. We wanted them to be flexible. I never liked the word rules, but the rest of my family did. They thought it was more practical. I wanted more nuance to them, because the last thing the world needs are more rules and policies. Uh, but we want to get things done. And so we came up with a few basic ones, and we wanted them to cover a range of ideas. But one was about the purpose of life. Rule number one was like understanding your purpose, understanding why you were created. What are you about? And, for people of faith, I think it's really clear. We were created for God's glory, for his pleasure. That's our purpose in life. And so we taught our kids from early on, like, you don't have to wonder. I watch people wander all around India to different ashrams trying to figure out the purpose of life. And they're good people, and it's an interesting journey. But we don't have to solve a grand cryptic puzzle. This is not Indiana Jones level cryptography and jumping over stuff. Like, Scripture lays it out pretty clearly for people of faith. I think it's to please God. And so rule number one for us was please God. For people who aren't coming from a faith perspective, I think it's still important to figure out what's the overarching purpose of what you're going to do on the planet. The second rule after please God was know your name. And it's all about life's identity. This sense that everybody has a name. We, in a sense, have a name tag, and the world tries to write all over our name tag. You know, if you don't make varsity, it wants to scribble loser on your name tag as if that's your name. If you get cut from this, if you don't get the lead role in the play, if you don't make partner at the right time, whatever the ladder you're climbing, if you're not achieving, the world wants to either write a negative, or if you are achieving, write a positive name on your name tag. We wanted to let them know that, hey, you're on Team Richmond. We're a family. Like, we've picked sides. I am not ambivalent. I want my kids to win. I'm on their team and they're on my team. And our identity as people of faith is rooted in who Jesus is. And he decided our identity. So I just had, Chris, I'm happy to tell you, on Monday, our oldest child promoted my wife and I to grandparent status. I now have a grandson. He's 4 days old. I am happy to report that his favorite activities right now are sleeping, eating, and long walks around the house in his father's arms. He has yet to accomplish anything. He has not billed an hour, landed a client. He has not drawn a picture, passed a test. He's done absolutely nothing. That dude is so valuable. Like, my wife is on cloud nine. This afternoon, I'm driving over to hold him again. Like, I'm so stoked about this little dude. He's never accomplished a thing, and his value is already infinite. And I think we get confused when we think that our identity, our name, gets tied up in our accomplishments or our failures. Everybody is valuable. You know, I just got back from visiting San Quentin prison in California with some friends, and we were meeting with inmates there, many of whom are serving life, who've got all over their name tag the word felon, offender, incarcerated, and just sitting with them, not to take away the responsibility for whatever they did, but just be like, you know what? You still matter. You still have value. There's still hope in your future. It's a really powerful moment. And so I think throughout life, if we know our name, we don't get a big head when things go well, and we don't think we're trash when things go poorly. That old Billy Joel song, you know, the good days weren't always good and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems, kind of thing. I think we stay more level when we have our identity secure. And then it becomes a lot more practical after those first two. Those first two rules, please God, purpose, know your name, identity, I think are the foundation. Rule number three, people are more important than stuff. This idea, if you ever have to choose between stuff and people, you're probably making the right choice if you choose people. So when the kids were little, it was about sharing. You know, never had to teach my kids the word no. No in mind came like pre-programmed in our children. We had to teach them how to share. We had to teach them how to take something that's yours and that you want to play with, and you're going to let someone else use it instead of you for a while, even though you don't want to. That's a powerful concept, and it applies throughout life. This idea, people are more important than stuff. If you're in a nonprofit and there's a donor that's being really inappropriate with one of the major gifts officers, you need to let her know, like, they don't get to treat you that way, even if they're the donor. Like, you're more important than the donation that they might give. Or they're the sales rep who's out there, like, they don't deserve to be harassed or mistreated. We want to make sure that everywhere people are more important than stuff. Rule number 4 is speak truth in love. This idea, there's 2 tests for everything we say. It needs to be true and it needs to be loving. Just because it's true. And a lot of people are brutal with truth. Truth can be really mean. You know, you can walk to a Walmart and say, that lady's fat, which could be totally true, but really not a loving thing to say at all. Or, it's just something, even if you didn't like the dinner we had at a friend's house, what if you just say like something true and loving? Like, thanks for taking the time to have us over and make this, as opposed to saying it's the best dish ever, like, which you didn't actually believe. Like, you can find something true and loving to say and keep us out of this idea of deception, but also keeps us towards what's best. What we focus on, what we look for, we'll find, and what we focus on will magnify. And so let's find good to magnify and invest in. And then rule number 5 is perhaps the most challenging for most people, which is feelings are not actions. And it really has this idea that feelings matter. Our emotions are real. They're not to be swept under the rug, ignored, or denied. They really do matter. They also don't decide how we act. We have agency, that we don't have to act consistent with our feelings if our feelings aren't leading us towards goodness. And so there was a time when our kids were little, they were playing Monopoly. My daughter was cheating against her little brother. He finally figured it out. He was furious with her. And so with all the energy of his 3-year-old body, he balled up his right hand into a fist and threw it right at her nose. Did no damage, but she cried. They ran to me, and he decided he was going to make his case. I figured out she was fine. She was upset. She was a little drama too. She was playing it up, and I'm like, hey man, what happened? He goes, she was cheating, and I'm like, totally true. I watched her do it. I was a little disappointed it took you that long to figure it out, but I get why you're mad. He's like, and I'm mad. That's his second argument. So first is she's cheating, which is true. Second argument was I'm upset. I'm mad. Every right to be mad. I'd be mad. I don't want anybody to cheat against me. And he's like, so I punched her in the nose and I do it again. I'm like, this is where your error comes, right? Just because you're mad doesn't mean you get to punch her in the nose, right? Your offense actually trumped hers. But here's what most people don't realize is just because you think your secretary's cute and you like the attention she gives you doesn't mean you should go away on the weekend with her instead of stay home with your wife. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you should act on it, even if the feelings are really understandable, are really legitimate. It's this idea that we have agency. Most of the people that I got to prosecute and put in jail didn't learn this rule. They didn't understand that just because they felt something doesn't mean they have to act on it. Now, when our feelings do align, it's great. When our feelings align with goodness and joy and the virtues that we're seeking, we have the opportunity to act on those. And to not act on goodness would be an error. But when our feelings are not aligned, like I don't feel like going to the gym, I probably should go anyway. I don't feel like turning in my expense report on time because I'm busy and I just really hate that kind of stuff. I should probably shut up, sit down, and do the thing I don't like to do, get it done, and move on. We all have stuff we don't like. We all have a full array of feelings, and we need to move through it. And then rule number 6 is know how to stop. It's all about life's limits. That everything is more fun if you can stop. Like riding a bike, tons of fun if you know how to stop. If every bike ride ends in a crash, bike riding's no fun at all. Skiing, totally true. If you don't know how to stop when you're skiing, you're not having a fun time on the slope. But it's true about everything. Know how to stop working. Know how to stop gardening. Know how to stop working out. Know how to stop watching sports. Know how to stop drinking bourbon. Know how to stop eating those French fries. Whatever it is, it's more fun, and your life will go better if you understand the limits. We tell our kids this all the time when they were little, like, hey, just don't be the last kid to stop roughhousing. When the teacher or the parent shouts down to the basement and says, hey, it's time to come up, just don't be the last kid. It's only the last kid that gets in trouble. Like, as long as you're not the last kid, you'll be fine. And so the extra 5 seconds of enjoyment is not worth whatever the punishment is going to be. Just don't be last. And then rule number 7 is about work ethic. It's finish the job. It's that in all things, we want to be finishers. We do not want to be people that get stuff halfway done. And so if your job's to empty the dishwasher, you're emptying the whole thing, all the way to the utensils. Like, we're finishing the job. If we're painting the side of the house, you're cleaning the brushes all the way to the end. Like, we finish things. And it's only fun. Like, we hear this all the time when my kids played soccer. Finish, right? You can have beautiful crossing shots all day long. If someone's not putting it in the net, it just doesn't count. There's no stat for the number of perfect crosses in soccer during a game. And so we got to be finishers. Land the client, close the deal, get the transaction done. And then rule number 8 is be generous. We want a generous posture. We live in a world of abundance, not scarcity. We want to be thinking about how do we share credit. as leaders with our direct reports, with people beneath us, how do we give them credit? How do we elevate them? If we elevate our team, we're elevating ourselves. You elevate yourself without your team, and they're going to resent you. You're going to undermine your own leadership. It's that old principle that, like, don't take the seat of honor. Like, let someone bring you up to that seat of honor or stay back. Like, you do not want to be the guy that gets pushed off the dais. And so I think what we want to do is think about how can we be generous with our time, with our efforts? How can we be generous and available? And the only way you can be available is to have margin. So if you've scheduled your life to the point where you have no margin, you've got no room to be available. If you're so busy that you can't stop for anything, you're probably out of balance. You need rest. You need time. So this, my wife and I were just talking about the only people who can really be spontaneous and take advantage of great opportunities are people who are well organized, who are not in crisis. If you're running around by the seat of your pants like a chicken with your head cut off, you have no room to actually take advantage of spontaneous new opportunities that come up because you've got no margin. And so if you're going to be generous, you have to be generous out of margin. And then rule number 9 is happen to your life. It's this idea of agency and intentionality. And so we talk a lot about this idea that we control nothing, but we influence a lot. People who want to control things are going to disappoint themselves and drive everyone around them crazy. There is no control. We don't control anything, but we have tons of influence. Like, I can't control if my son gets to make the soccer team or the basketball team. But he has influence. He can't decide for the coach, but he decides how much he practices. Is he going to drill and shoot free throws all day and get it and nail it down? Is he going to put in the time and the effort? He can put himself in a position to influence what will happen, but he can't control it. Every bride wants to get married on a sunny day. A third of brides get married on damp days. And so you can't control the weather, and you got to send out the save the date way before the weather report comes. And so you decide, are you going to be the bride that throws a fit because it rained on their wedding day? Or are you going to dance with umbrellas, right? You're like, the people at the wedding are going to enjoy one more than the other. And so we just have to realize we're not in control of everything. We're not in control of anything, but we do have influence. And so, like, I'm not in control of my kids. They can make good decisions and bad decisions as adults. I can have a closed mouth and an open door, and when they ask for counsel, I can give it to them. And when we have the opportunity, we can coach. But the reality is, they get to make their own choices, and we get to have influence, but we don't get to have control. We can't fix our kids, can't fix our spouse, can barely fix ourselves, but we can have influence on how we love people well. And then the final rule is outwardly focused. It's about how do we engage the world? And that is make wrong things right. This idea of justice. And so my philosophy professors in school bent themselves into a pretzel saying they can't figure out what the definition of justice is. I kind of think I figured it out. It's making wrong things right. Big things, little things, local things, global things. It's seeing something wrong and making it right. It's picking up some litter. It's pulling the weed out of the garden bed. It's sitting with your elderly neighbor across the street and listening to that story again, just to give them some dignity. It's helping our kids think, hey, there's a new kid in 7th grade. Invite them to the lunch table. Like, what lonelier place in the world is the cafeteria on your first day of a new 7th grade school? Like, just invite them to lunch. You don't want to be their best friend forever, but, like, what if we just, like, see something wrong, someone who's lonely, someone who's outside, bring them in. And if we do that, we think we can live a more meaningful life. And so what I share with you guys when we met a few months ago is, like, we developed these principles, we gave them names, we talked about them with our kids all the time. Lots of funny stories about how they applied them in different times, how they held us to account on a number of occasions that we weren't following them. But it gave our family a framework and a common language to use. And they're not prescriptive. People can make up their own frameworks, come up with your own principles, come up with your own silly sayings with your kids. I just think there's a value to having a plan in order to live well. A framework to hang all the the parables and the other teachings and the good books they read or the songs they hear onto. And if we have a good framework, I think we can make a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, that was so good. And it was so impactful for me, like I said. And I know people listening to this are going to be encouraged to maybe go do this with their own families, which will be awesome. I want to wrap us up with 10 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Where I'm going to hit you with anything and you come back with just the first thing that comes to mind. No wrong answer. Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
Jesus.
All right. 5 words that most describe you.
Intentional, hardworking, curmudgeon, craggy, and listener.
I like it. Favorite book or author?
Favorite author has to be C.S. Lewis. Favorite book is probably Great Divorce.
All right. Favorite food?
Good steak.
All right. Favorite thing to do in your free time?
Go rescue fish from rivers.
Wow. What's a surprising fact about you?
Probably that I was born in Italy.
Wow. That is surprising. All right. Favorite place you've been?
Machu Picchu. On my 25th anniversary, my wife and I went there.
Wow. Is there anywhere in the world that you want to go that you have not been to yet?
I've been a lot of places. I'd love to go to Iran if it could ever become peaceful. Tehran is amazing. Love to see the Elburz Mountains. I'd love to explore that area if peace would ever come.
Yeah. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Listen more and talk less.
All right. And last of the 10, this is a podcast on servant leadership. Why do you think it's important for people to become better servant leaders?
I think that if we're better servant leaders, we're actually going to accomplish more of our goals, but we're going to accomplish them in a way that brings everybody up with us. So we're actually going to be more effective on both the ultimate sort of objective scale of goal achievement, but we're going to do it in a way that helps the people around us flourish.
Wow, that's so good. One question that I just thought of, it's totally outside of the rapid fire questions, which you crushed. But do people ask you, and do you have thoughts on kids' safety? How to keep your kids safe online these days?
Keeping kids safe is so critical. And so what we thought a lot about is how do we be with them in that, with them in their devices, knowing what they're exploring, what they're seeing, and what they're doing, helping them understand what the risks are and the warning signs are so that they can keep themselves safe. But what I think is most critical is that we don't do it in a way that creates fear in them. We don't want them to be fearful of the world. We just want them to be smart about what the world has to offer. The most interesting frame for us has been to help them think about how do you help your friends if they ever encounter this. So it becomes less about what are you doing online and more about like you may have a friend that gets hit up in a chat room or a discussion on a game site about this or that. If they came to you, how would you respond? Like, how could you, like, what would be some tools that you could help them with? Where we're equipping them with ideas that they could pass along. Or most recently, we've seen a ton of sextortion hitting kids, where kids have been baited into providing photos and then told that they're going to be released. And we've seen a lot of kids commit suicide over it. And so we've talked a lot about like, how do we help kids know that there is nothing that can be disclosed that would actually stop anybody from loving you? Like most people are just going to look at that and be like, oh, that was a stupid thing to send, but whatever. Everyone's done something stupid in their life. Like this is water under the bridge. Tomorrow needs you. This is not the end of the world. And lower the stakes for kids who might have done something foolish. But positioning our kids as folks who could give better counsel to their friends is a way to help them learn the lesson themselves.
Wow. That's so good. There are so many nuggets of wisdom all throughout this. I'm thankful that you were willing to be on our podcast. Thank you for your time and all of the wisdom you shared.
Good to be with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update.
Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.